In this video, we break down the DIS Unplugged's latest video on Bob Chapek's 3-year contract renewal. It's a fascinating conversation. We're going to play his video, kind of break it down along the way. Up next. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG55. I want to welcome you, Dre, Dr. Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed, to another video. Thank you for coming back on, brother.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, I like I said, I love being on here. Love talking about this stuff. So thank you for having me on. This is fantastic. And I think the topic today is going to be very, very interesting. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and get the introductions out of the way, huh? You can go ahead and follow me right there at VashSky, just like it is spelled on your screen right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at OrangeGo55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. There you go. We'll go ahead and do it that way.
Perfect.
I think this is a very interesting conversation. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Dre and I, it's no secret. I mean, we've kind of talked about it before on our show, how we're big fans of the DIS and Pete Werner of the DIS. We both watch the content over there a lot. Oh. And Pete had some interesting opinions and kind of takes on this whole Bob Chapek 3-year contract renewal. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm going to link his video down below. It'll also be in the end screen caps at the end of this video, so you can just kind of click on it. It's a fantastic video. We highly suggest you watch his entire stream on all of it, because it really is great. But for this video, we're going to just kind of take a portion of it and kind of break it down. So now, from what I understand, Dre, you do have the video.
I do. And it should be right there. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
To extend Dr. Evil's contract for another 3 years. We're stuck with this clown. It was a
obviously going over the contract extension of Chapek for those unfamiliar.
Unanimous vote to extend Bob Chapek's contract as CEO for an additional 3 years. And this was met with the very expected response from the fan community. No one is happy about it. The fact that it was unanimous, the fact it was 3 years. Now, we'd heard rumors that the board was going to do this.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So this was not necessarily a surprise. But all I can say is that my hopes are contracts can be broken.
They can, but as I sat here when we were talking about just conjecturing on will he, won't he be re-upped or not, I sat here and said if he's making money for the company, he's going to be sticking around. And I think that's the case. I think he is just overall just making money. So we know that from the earnings calls, from everything that we're hearing. He is very direct-to-consumer, the way he salivates when he talks about the direct-to-consumer arm of the company, like he's making money for them. But yes, you're exactly right. There was a weeping and gnashing of teeth immediately from the DIS community.
Yeah, and that's that is a particular insight, right? I think she is 100% correct. That look, the Chapek is making the board money,
Right.
and I do believe his vision is consistent with the board's vision of how this company should be run going forward, especially right now. We've talked about how tumultuous of a time it actually is, and Chapek so far, all things considering. Now, I understand from the Parks, Sparks people, we might have a different opinion about how Chapek's actually doing, at least as it relates to our division. But overall, actually doing fairly well. Go ahead.
And even from the Parks perspective, I see a lot of complaining on Twitter about Genie Plus and the upcharges and the expense, how expensive things are. But I still see the same Parks people who complain about that stuff in the queues waiting to spend their money, just waiting to spend their money on this, that, and the next thing. And it's like, well, if you're going to be upset about it, you got to vote with your wallet. We've been saying this for a long time, Greg. Like,
Absolutely.
You can't complain on social media and then be like, all right, here's my money. Like, Disney will gladly take your angry dollars, okay? They have no problem doing that. And the parks people, I don't know why, they don't seem to understand that. It's really odd. And
it is very bizarre because, like you said, I mean, it's like, if you dislike these practices, why do you engage in them? And maybe, it's Disney. They understand that people have an emotional connection to it, and they kind of push the boundaries on that because they understand that people will be coming back almost no matter what. It's, and this is why it's going to be interesting going forward because, do I think necessarily the park's going to be empty? No. Do I think people will still be going to them? Yes, but what will they do when they get there? Will they be going for the same amount of time? Will they be cutting back on maybe the days they visit the individual parks at Walt Disney World or Disneyland? Maybe they might go somewhere else for a couple of those parks, a couple of those days, right? Or maybe they spend less when they're in the parks. Maybe they don't necessarily get Genie Plus for the entire family every single day, day in, day out. Maybe they don't go to the most expensive restaurants and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how per cap goes moving forward here and how people might be voting with their wallets maybe within these spaces and maybe not just a all in all out kind of thing. It's going to be fascinating to see how that all kind of turns out here. But like you said, I mean, it's completely 100% true, right? It's you have a guy that's been pretty successful at monetizing the various divisions, especially from the parks side, and creating that revenue that the company so desperately needs. And that's kind of where this is all kind of based around here. I think a lot of people viewed his work with Disney Plus and those kind of factors as really integral to their success, especially during the pandy, right, as we talked about on this show. And as it kind of relates to the parks themselves, he has generated that revenue. It's interesting to listening to other people's discussions on this and this whole thing. It's interesting that we obviously see the performance of Lightyear and how it relates to maybe another movie that came out recently and how there's disparity there. It's interesting how Pixar faced that horrific box office performance in the form of Lightyear, and yet days after that happens, Chapek is renewed. So it just tells you they have faith in Chapek's vision, and maybe we haven't seen the fruits of that carried out throughout the entire company just yet.
Not yet. It takes a long time to see the results of anything in a company this size, and especially when you're dealing with creative stuff. You have to understand, a lot of people like to complain about the stuff happening right now, like in the movies and things like that, and they blame Chapek. These movies, a movie like Lightyear, was in production 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. Okay, yes. Animated movies take a long time. These are everything we're seeing now, including Boba Fett, Kenobi, Ms. Marvel. All this stuff is residual Bob Iger stuff. This has really very little to do with Bob Chapek right now.
Right.
For better or worse. So.
Well, yes, and in the form of Lightyear and a couple of others. When Chapek would attempt to meddle with those things, there was resistance, pushback, and all that kind of stuff. So, some of these things are being presented to us without essentially any Chapek involvement. Other things, I think, like Ms. Marvel, might actually have some involvement there. Might actually have some. Maybe we should send this back to reshoots. Maybe fix this, fix that kind of thing. But like you said, OG, overall, it's going to take a long time for projects born and bred in the Chapek era to actually bear some fruit here. So it's going to be quite interesting. But let's continue.
I really thought the stock was going to say more to whether I didn't see it coming. I thought he wasn't getting renewed. I'm kind of shocked.
And some people did see it coming.
Yes.
But others didn't.
Right. And I got to disagree with this gentleman. I forgive me. I'm not familiar with his name, but I do have to disagree with him a little bit on this in terms of the stock price. Mm-hmm. If we had a booming economy, the stock market was sky high, it's just booming, right?
Yes.
But Disney stock was in the doldrums. Disney stock was like $95. Okay, right. Then I could see his point. The stock price, definitely, right? But everything is down. The stock market is down. Now, I will concede that Disney is lower than some of their competition, but I also think an element of that is just because Disney also has more invested overall. Like even Universal doesn't have cruise lines and the amount of parks and all this stuff that Disney has. So even Universal, who is the closest competitor to Disney, still falls pretty short in regards to what they own and what their reach is. So it's going to hit Disney harder than it would a Comcast. Like I said, they don't have cruise lines. They don't have as many parks in the States and internationally like Disney does. So the Disney stock will get hit harder. So I think that the market overall, the board isn't going to punish Chapek for the stock price right now when everything is in the toilet.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of most of what's going on right now with the stock price is really honestly out of Chapek's control.
Yeah, I would say that to a degree. I think Disney was hit harder, maybe a little bit than others, and I think one of the reasons why that was like you said. I mean, in terms of content, or I should say revenue generators as opposed to Comcast, a little bit different. But also to remember, Disney pivoted into streaming maybe a little bit harder than Comcast actually did. Right, and we see how that affects Netflix. I think there is a little bit of residual from that hitting Disney's end, where it's just like, okay, like, you know, as Wall Street reevaluates streaming and the companies that highly leverage it, maybe there's a reallocation there, so to speak, right? And I remember talking on I believe I said it on air, but I remember talking to you, OG, multiple times privately, how I believe that the stock price was a little bit inflated, you know, given all the parameters and so forth. Now, again, it's a little bit lower than maybe I expected because a lot of those things that were, you know, when the stock price was inflated, a lot of those things that weren't on, you know, that should have been online weren't. Right, and now those things are back online. It's very interesting how that all works out. But I think the board is very much like, hey, you got us through this, you can get us through. Or I'm sorry, you got us through that in terms of the events of 2020 and beyond. You can get us through this and all that, you know, and going forward. And I think, you know, while he has been renewed, it's really time to put up or shut up at this point, right? It's like, okay, 100%. We're getting out. You know, we're getting out. Like, yes, we are in an economic tumultuous time, but we need to be, you know, producing revenue as well. Like we need to be kind of building here and building towards something that's profitable. So it's very interesting. But again, some people predicted this, some people didn't. Keep note of the people who did.
Yep.
I thought the stock was going to dictate that. Gotta go.
Yeah. Well, he's gone. He's
renewed.
He's going to be our...
He's
refurbished.
Yeah.
We're stuck with him.
Yeah.
At least for the foreseeable future.
Settle in.
Who do you think, though? This is my concern. Anybody that appears to be a potential successor to him, he gets rid of.
If you can pause it right there for a second.
Go ahead.
This is something that I kind of have a little bit of an issue with, and I respectfully disagree with Pete on this.
Yeah.
He's taking the assumption that Peter Rice was fired out of fear that Rice was going to replace Chapek. Now, we don't know that. Well, from what we're hearing, even from the trades, Peter Rice was kind of doing some underhanded stuff behind Chapek's back. It wasn't that Rice had ambition to one day be CEO. He was actively trying to undermine Bob Chapek. Now, as any business owner, I don't know any boss or entrepreneur or any kind of manager that would put up with that. Okay, nobody. And I also want to ask this. Who was seen as a possible replacement for Bob Iger years ago? Tom Staggs. And why? Where was the media, the mainstream media, the Hollywood trades when Bob Iger fired Tom Staggs? Was there this narrative like, oh, Bob Iger is trying to he's trying to eliminate his competition, right? I didn't hear any of that when Tom Staggs got fired, but for some reason, when Bob Chapek fires somebody that's seen as maybe a successor, it's like malicious and there's some shady dealings, you know. You can't buy into everything you read. And I do believe because of how how aggressive Chapek was in firing Peter Rice and what we're hearing in the trades and what have you, there was more to this than just Chapek got jelly. Okay, let's be real.
There's much more to this. Now, it's the way that trades are framing this whole thing, the way that some of the quote insiders are framing this, right? Oh, he was competition, Chapek felt threatened, had to be removed, and it's like, first of all, as we've astutely pointed out in this show before in the past, it's like it doesn't stop them from, from the board hiring Peter Rice later for a CEO position down the line, and it wasn't just a move by Chapek. Chapek had to get approval from the board because you had to buy out that contract. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars there. Right. So it's not like he just went rogue, and just like, oh, I'm gonna snap necks just because they're threatening my position, right? As we talked about on the show before, to do it in this way, in this manner, tends to suggest some other factors at play, and I think we've been very clear on that, like subversion, like some stuff underhand stuff that was going on in the background that nobody's talking about, right? That kind of stuff would lend itself to the way that Peter Rice was let up.
Right, and you brought up a great point, Dre. The board, because of Peter Rice's stature within the company, and because he was like basically brand new, that like the ink wasn't even dry on his renewal. I think he just signed a contract back in August. It hasn't even been a year yet.
Right.
So for Chapek to fire this guy, he had to get approval from the board to pay out his contract, an 8-figure contract.
Yes.
So this whole idea that it's just man baby Chapek just firing people, I think is a little bit, I don't know. In my opinion, I think it's a little ridiculous. I think there's obviously something there that Chapek saw and the board saw that was very, very problematic. And I think it goes far deeper than just, well, he was seen as a replacement. Far, far deeper than that. The board, Susan Arnold, would never sign off on some sort of petty nonsense like that, in my opinion.
Right. I agree 150%. And look, I think Werner makes himself clear here. There's a little bit of a bias here, right? Against one person and for another, right? And sometimes I've noticed when you're heavily biased, it can color your perception and even make you susceptible or vulnerable to takes that are against that person, right? And maybe, you maybe don't think as critically because it's a little bit of, maybe wish fulfillment or, some of the other things that are in line with your bias. And you have to be really kind of, I've noticed it in, kind of outliner work and, some of the other things I'm into. You can't let your bias cloud your judgment to an overwhelming degree. You have to kind of keep those things in check. And, I think this is a little bit of a manifestation of that, at least where Pete's concerned here. But I think we should move on here.
Who do you think? And that makes me think that Josh D'Amaro. I don't think Josh, in the place he's in right now, is seen as a successor. The fact that he still has a job means that he's not seen as a successor. What will signal that he is if he gets moved over from Parks and Resorts to the studio to consumer products to one of those other areas where you have to have that requisite experience. Take a look at, this is what Disney does. Josh started out as Senior Vice President of Adventures by Disney. Moved on to be general manager of Animal Kingdom, moved on to be senior vice president of resorts for Walt Disney World, went to be consumer products for Florida, went to be president of Disneyland, went to be president of Disney World, then became, what's his exact title? He's
I want to say
chairman Disney Parks and Resorts.
Oh, no.
I do want to touch upon a little bit on Josh Giamaro here. And I want to make it very clear. I have nothing against Josh Giamaro. I think that he seems like a really nice guy. He seems to do his job well. My issue from minute one has never been Josh Giamaro. My issue from minute one has been the fan response to Josh Giamaro, that Josh does nothing wrong and Chapek does nothing right. It's the fan response. Josh as a person, as an executive, is absolutely fine. I completely support him being in that role. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people that support Josh Giamaro, including like Pete and just overall the Disney fandom, needs to understand. Bob Chapek became CEO in the end of February of 2020. And by May, just 3 months later, he promoted your guy, Josh Giamaro, to run the parks. Now, that's fine. And I think it was a right decision. But if you think Chapek has terrible instincts, is bald man bad, one-dimensional, mustache twirling villain, and you love Daddy Josh, well, your antenna should go up that Chapek looked at D'Amaro and said, you know what? That's the guy. One of my first acts as CEO, I'm going to promote that guy. Doesn't that make anyone sit up a little bit and take notice that maybe D'Amaro isn't the guy you think he is? If the guy you hate, Chapek, is like so quick to promote him, I think fans need to understand that. And again, I'm not saying D'Amaro's a bad person. He's not. I don't think Chapek's a bad person. But just because you have charisma doesn't mean you're not a business-minded guy. Doesn't mean that you're not in line with the data-driven mentality that Chapek is. You know, politicians come in all kinds of different personalities. You have people that are very charismatic in politics, like Gavin Newsom. And then you have Mitch McConnell, okay? But they're both politicians. They're both kind of cut from the same cloth. That's all I'm saying here is that maybe Josh isn't the guy you think he is. And Chapek, so quick to promote him, kind of points in that direction. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I take a little bit of a different stance on this whole thing. I don't necessarily believe that Bob Chapek or Josh Giamaro are bad people, right? Now, Josh Giamaro, I'm much more critical of his performance because it's like, you know, some people will say like, oh, I think he's doing a great job. Okay, what has he done? Parks are dirtier than before. The attractions are breaking down more than ever. They've instituted Genie Plus and you know, Lightning Lane and reservations and so forth that people hate. You know, there are cuts at all corners of the company in terms of the parks division itself, and well, actually the company at large. That's a whole other story. But you know, it's like, what has he done?
Right.
Tell me what he's done. Give me something to hang my hat on here. And they go into this, you know, with Josh Giamaro a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, I love what he's done. You know, I think he's great. I think he's awesome. Okay, what has he done though?
Right.
What I mean, what are the things that, you know, Josh Giamaro, you know, or anything that you've seen the parks recently that is like, you know what, that was better than before. And go ahead and point that one, because I don't hear it, I don't see it.
No, well, the only thing that I see whenever you ask anybody what has Josh Giamaro done, all I hear is, well, you know, he's in the parks, man. he rolls up his sleeve. He's wearing tennis shoes. He says hi to me when I'm in Frontierland. You know, that's great. And that's what a Disney president should do. That's what a Disney Parks president should do.
Sure.
But what has he done of substance?
Yes.
Goose egg.
And that's what I'm saying. That's why it's so frustrating, because it's like I hear people all the time talk about him. I hear people, oh yeah, like you said, oh, he's in the parks all the time. Okay, where's the fruits from that? Where's the, you know, hey, he walked to the parks and he saw that there were some problems and stuff like that and fixed them and shored them up. It's like, okay, yeah, all right, I got you. Or, hey, you know what? When he steps in there, morale is improved and all that kind of stuff. And okay, yeah, sure.
Cool.
But it's like, he's just like you said. I mean, he kind of screams politician to me. Yeah, he's got a good looking face. He's got that rapport. He makes you feel good and all that kind of stuff. But then you look around, and you go, yeah, well, there's trash there. There's trash is overflowing over there. Yeah, a couple of the stalls are out, and a couple of the attractions are breaking down. Like, what's going on here? But he makes you feel good, right? And it's like I don't have much sympathy for that, and that's why we call him Daddy Josh, because it's like, yeah, he makes you feel good, but and you evangelize about him, but where's the substance here? Where's the actual tangible things? And it's interesting that you use the politician language because I don't know if we'll get to it in the time that we have, but Pete Warner later on says, might be governor of California, which is a very interesting thing, very interesting prediction. I don't necessarily believe that's going to be the case because if you know California politics, you know that anybody running for the office, there's a little bit of a process there, and I'll just leave it at that, right? And I don't think Josh DeMauro is part of that process. I'll just say that. But it's a very interesting thing how some people attribute political ambitions to him just because of just how he comes off. Very interesting.
It's crazy. Let's continue.
Nope. Did we? Give me a second.
Signature experiences.
Yeah.
That is, I'm looking at his
Yeah,
Instagram
parks
right
and
now.
resorts.
Chairman, Disney Parks Experience and Products.
Yeah. So they start moving him around to other divisions, not related to the parks, not related to consumer products, I guess, because he's already got it on his resume. They start moving because you can't run Disney if you don't know the studio. So I think if Josh is to be the chosen one to succeed this clown,
To bring balance to the force.
to bring balance back to the force, expect to see him move over to the studio side.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part, though, is they've obviously said many times throughout the years now, since Disney Plus has launched, that direct-to-consumer is the goal of the company. More, I mean, parks and resorts obviously is important, but direct-to-consumer, we hear it over and over and over again. And so while I could see them trying to dabble Josh in the studio in some sort of capacity, I can't see them ever being like, hey, if we want to move you forward, you're going to have to like really get in on Disney Plus and everything happening with their direct-to-consumer market, because it is just so completely different.
It is a very kind of different thing. I will say that. I will kind of add that, yes, DTC is a huge, factor of their business going forward, right? It was a huge primary target for them, but I am hearing, I don't know about you, OG, but I am hearing that there's a little reevaluation on that. Now that Wall Street's kind of reevaluated that position, maybe they will as well. Is that what you're hearing on your end? Because that's what I'm getting now.
Yeah, and I heard that also from Braden, friend of the channel, Mickey Views, was saying that now that Chapek has been renewed, he's hearing that there's like a kind of a renewed focus on the parks division because it's a more profitable thing right now. Which is probably true. I mean, it is true. I mean, it is more profitable, but also at the same time, Disney Plus is a fledgling kind of industry, so to speak, or a thing. Right. And the parks didn't weren't out the gate profitable either in 1955. I mean, there's always going to be those few years when you start something new that there's going to be like that kind of climbing out of the hole, you know what I'm saying? And the parks are a very mature market. So of course they're obviously making more money than Disney Plus because Disney Plus is barely 3 years old, So I get that. But I mean, I could see Chapek kind of like, all right, because Wall Street's mindset is kind of shifting a little bit, and it's kind of getting a little bit more like away from just like this like arms race for subscribers and more about like, okay, but are you making money? So I think there's gonna be a focus on making money over just the number of subs that you're gaining and what have you. So there is a shift. I definitely see the shift occurring. So, but the studio is very important. And I know a lot of parks people don't like to acknowledge that. They kind of see it. They kind of roll their eyes like, oh God, here we go. He's focusing on direct to consumer in the studio. It's like, yeah, but if you don't have the content from the studio, you don't 100%. Have anything to feed the parks. Even Roy Disney, the nephew of Walt, was saying, if you watch Waking Sleeping Beauty, watch it on Disney Plus. He even says that the studio was, and will always be the heartbeat of the company. And he's right. The studio is the heartbeat. It fuels all of it. And the parks suffer when the studio isn't producing, hits. It just does. We've seen it,
100%. My only addition to that would be, hey, it's fine to spend $30 billion on this on the studios if you want to, but can we at least get, I don't know, a couple billion? Can we at least get just a little bit of that? But that's neither here nor there. I think that's going to be realigning here. We'll see. But we want to get to the main point here.
Before it was throw in a little merchandise, a little bit of studio, a little bit of parks, boom, you've got it. But it's just so different now, and I think that whoever is the future, if someone is going to replace Chapek, I think it's going to come from that line. Hence, the guy from Fox that was unceremoniously shown the door. That was someone that, yeah, he probably was afraid of him being a successor one day. So get rid of him in that way. But I still think it's always going to come from that line. That's where Disney's seen stars and seen dollar signs in their eyes right now. So I think Josh is a great figurehead. The way on the Wish that he was all around, making sure that everyone there saw him like constantly was, I think that's, Disney needs someone like that, that's there to smile. And I know he's more than just a pretty face, and he can do a lot more than that, but I think that is what they need, considering so many people
Josh is
like
a star.
Chapek.
Josh is a star, and he engages a room just by walking into it. We saw that in any, as you pointed out, in any number of places on the Wish. But what was telling is I walked up to him when I first saw him and went up, gave him a hug, and said, "How you doing?" And his face just kind of went, he's got a tough job. He's got a tough job. But then when he started talking about the Wish, he lit up. When he started talking about the ship, he really lit up. But he said to me, he goes, "My staff tells me you don't like me anymore." I said, "I love you, Josh, but I'm going to give you a hard time, and I'm going to tell you the same things I would tell anybody about what I think about where the parks are. I love you to death. I know you're a good man. I just don't like what's happening at the parks right now, and that's happening on your watch."
Okay.
And he goes, "We'll have coffee," which we never did.
Never did. Interesting.
Couple things here. There's a lot here. This is actually very fascinating. A lot to chew on.
This is it right here.
When you're listening to them talk about Josh, and this touches upon what we just talked about a little bit ago.
Yeah.
What are all the things that they talk about Josh? How do they describe Josh? It's never like, oh, he's pushing for quality in the parks, or he's pushing for an e-ticket, or he's pushing for that. No. When he walks into a room, he lights it up with a smile, and he's so nice, and he's this and that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's very little substance in the Josh D'Amaro kind of fandom. It's always about his looks, his charisma, his smile, how nice he is. And those are all great qualities to have. I'm not disparaging Josh D'Amaro, but that doesn't make him a good leader. It doesn't make him a good executive. It just makes him, okay, so he's a likable guy, and that's fantastic.
Right.
But that doesn't really mean much if he's not backing that up with some real policies, substantive, things. Like there's nothing that you can point to that he's done on a substantial level that you can go, okay, Josh was the reason for this e-ticket coming to the parks, or Josh was responsible for this great fireworks show. None of that. He's got a great smile. He lights up a room. He's really friendly. He wears tennis shoes and says hi to me at Avengers Campus. I'm sorry, that's not enough for me. It just isn't, and I don't know. And you notice that in that little exchange right there, it's always about his personality. And I've noticed that trend with fans over and over and over again. But the interesting thing about that whole thing, number one, let's talk about, he said, D'Amaro came up to him and he said, "My staff said you don't like me." Now that's interesting because that implies his staff watches the DIS. Okay. And that's great. But do you think that it really starts and stops with the DIS? I am certain D'Amaro's staff watches the DIS, maybe OG55, maybe WDWNT, maybe Mickey Views. Certain of it. They are watching these channels and kind of getting a feel for what the fandom is saying. And that was basically an admittance of that.
Absolutely. And we have heard rumors indicating that consistent with Bob Chapek's vision of we're going to be data driven and we're going to be very consumer focused, right? How do you get a read on what the consumers want? Well, you look at what they produce themselves and what they're talking about, what those conversations are and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting how it's like, my people tell me you don't like me very much, kind of thing. And how he read that in that way, right? Where it's like, I think from Giamarro's perspective, he took it very personally because he's a personable person. But really what Pete Warner and reiterating to him right there, it was like, this isn't about you. It's about the vision. This is about how this these parks are being run. It's about how these cruise liners are being operated. It's about how consumers really interact with these parks and how their experiences are maybe not so glowing all the time.
Right.
And he iterated that to him. And it's very kind of fascinating, that kind of dynamic that we see here. Because like you said, OG, I think they are watching. I think they are kind of reading and listening and looking and seeing what the conversation is and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, what lessons do you take out of that? How do you apply what you're learning and what you're, what data you're taking in and can you really get to the heart of what consumers want? That's a really fascinating thing here, and I don't know if the kind of Chapek regime has really gotten to that point yet. I don't really think they've reached that level. I think they're taking in a lot of lessons, but are they learning the right ones? Very interesting.
No, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm glad that Pete has DeMaro's ear. I'm glad that he has a direct line of communication. I mean, the dude even offered him to go to lunch, So I'm glad that he has that, because at least like DeMaro is hearing what's going on. But if you don't put pen to paper and you don't act on that advice from Pete or anything like, what good is it?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not disparaging DeMaro. It's great that he's in the parks with tennis shoes and saying hi to you and he's friendly. That's fantastic. But if the trash cans are overflowing and there's problems, the great smile and the niceties mean nothing.
Yes.
I'm sorry, they don't, and it's, you can be the nicest person in the world, but if you're not performing in your job, you're not performing in your job.
100%. And that's kind of my deal here. I mean, we put so much emphasis on Chapek when, as we've pointed out multiple times on the show, when Chapek was in the seat of the Parks Division. It was like, oh, it's all Chapek. And now that Chapek's out, it's still Chapek, and it's just weird. Now, the only way that works is, okay, well, I think Josh Giamarro and their business acumen, I think, is aligned with Chapek to a degree that fans are maybe a little bit uncomfortable with admitting. And that's an integral thing there.
I think it's a very integral thing there, Vash, and I think you're absolutely onto something. When I said earlier, I think it kind of ties into what you just said, where it's like Bob Chapek, you look at the timeline. Bob Chapek was announced CEO in February of 2020. Within 3 months' time, not very long, by May, he already promoted Josh Giamarro. Now, if you don't like Bob Chapek and you think he's a money guy and a bean counter and one-dimensional, bald man bad, Dr. Evil, your antenna should go up that he was so fast to promote your dude, DeMaro. I just think that's common sense.
Well, and he promoted him across his Josh Giamarro's rise. Chapek appointed him in many of those key positions himself. So he believed in him before, and he believes him now.
Right, and I'm one of those people that and you are too, where we're very fair to Chapek. We don't hate Bob Chapek. I don't think he's a bad guy or like the evil whatever. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying, like, if you're a fan who despises Bob Chapek, then you should, and you love DeMaro, you should definitely take notice in the fact that he was very quickly promoted and selected under Bob Chapek. It is noteworthy. I think a lot of fans kind of miss that point. A lot of fans seem to think like, oh, well, Josh is kind of like this outsider. That's kind of like, so, poor Josh, he has to deal with bald man bad too. And it's not poor Josh. I'm telling you, he is more connected, seeing eye to eye with Chapek than you think he is. And I think fans need to really, kind of double check their intuition on that one.
100%, 100%. And the thing is Pete read that, as in Josh was a little bit down when they initially met, right? And he read that as, oh yeah, well, you have to take all this stuff from Chapek and stuff like that. Yeah, I get it right there. But I think it's more about hey, it's a very tumultuous time for all the Disney company, parks, especially. And I think it's Josh having to, constantly kind of be, this person who's like, okay, we have to uphold what Disney is kind of known for, but also too, we have to, implement yield management strategies. We have to, kind of do all this stuff to kind of take it in this new direction here. And Josh D'Amaro is very much central and a part of that. I don't know why he gets, and even the gentleman on the DIS actually called it. He's like, oh, he's a figurehead. And it's like, okay, well, why is he there then? Why is he there? He is implementing, I think, a kind of a strategy going forward that's consistent with Chapek's vision, yes, but is very much implemented by him himself.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. So it's a fascinating dynamic and a fantastic video by the DIS Unplugged. Now, we want to make it very clear. We respect Pete Werner a great deal. We are huge fans of his work. We might disagree on stuff, but that's what being a fan is, right? We can all come as a family and sort of talk about stuff, agree and disagree. And that's great. And I'm going to go ahead and link his video at the very end. You can click on it. Highly suggest you do. Watch the entire stream because it's phenomenal. It's also going to be in the description down below. So watch his video, subscribe to his content, his channel if you're not already. But we love Pete and his New Jersey kind of swag, man. The guy's great.
I love it, man. I love it. He is so good. Anytime Pete Werner puts out a video on the DIS Unplugged, I'm right there because I do respect him. And yeah, okay, we pointed out maybe some things we don't disagree with, but I love that he's able to say what he says, be honest, and honestly, Pete Werner, very fair, very fair. He will kind of tap into, I think, what not only what he himself is maybe looking for from the company, or maybe his kind of proclivities or whatever, but he's very kind of consumer focused in his own way because he has to deal with clients, that do a lot of business with Disney. So if it's something that maybe he doesn't like, or maybe something that he's receiving, maybe that how that translates to their business affects Disney's business. Very fair in that regard. So a lot of respect.
Absolutely. And I actually, when Walt Disney World kicked off its 50th anniversary, a lot of the fandom, they were shitting all over Harmonious and Enchanted or Enchantment and all these shows. And Pete Werner, look, it wasn't the popular thing to say at the time, but Pete Werner got on his live stream and said, I think the fans are being ridiculous. I love these shows, and I respect that because I think that he's not afraid to sort of go against what the hive mind is saying about stuff. He's not afraid of getting shit in his comment section. He's going to say what he says because he believes what that's his viewpoint. And I respect the hell out of that, so he is an honorable man, an honest man. We love Pete. We love his content. So definitely subscribe and support him and check him out.
100%. Well, I know you have to get going here, OG. So I'll go ahead and close it out for you. That way, we get this all kind of neatly packaged in a bow, right? Hey, if you like the content here, please go ahead and subscribe. We've got a lot of videos coming out a little bit, very, very, very soon. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff like this. Obviously we'll talk parks, directly parks related and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to cover all facets of it. Obviously, our buddy George, Disney Family Man 23, is back in town, so we got content coming with him, and it's going to be a blast, guys. So please subscribe. You definitely want to be checking that out, and share this video if you liked it yourself. So thank you. All the support is appreciated. Anyway, if you want to talk to me and DM, interact, whatever, go ahead and do so right down there at VashSky. Love to hear your comments and questions and all of that for all the robust discussion, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So that is where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Dre. I appreciate you, brother, for coming on as usual. We had a fantastic conversation. And again, I want to thank the DIS for a fantastic live stream. Everybody at home, check them out. They are phenomenal. Comment down below, like, subscribe, share, and as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.